we'll be doing today is we'll be looking into a few more policies, and we'll look into. Then we'll go into products and developer portal and app insights if time permits. Okay. So this is a different insight. This is a different instance of API management that I used from the earlier session. So okay, so I have a few APIs added here, or I think okay. This might be a different one. So what happens is, let's just see. So these are the operations available in this API. Like I said earlier, this API is readily available, and this API is the backend. The backend is the one which gives the information about. It gives the information on the response. It gives the response to the requests, and your API forms the front end, which regulates the flow through to and fro information from the data from the backend. Okay, so you have four levels of control here. One is the front end, which is where the request comes, and then there's inbound processing, where you can add some inbound processing policies. And after which the flow goes to the request is passed to the backend, which is where the API actually resides. And this is the address which is supposed to be classified. It's not meant to be publicly exposed. So the request goes to the backend, and then the request, the backend responds with the particular request, the response, and then that comes to the outbound processing. So here is some, outbound processing. You can add some policies to process the request, process the response, and after which it's sent to the front end again. Okay. So we will see today some caching policies. Caching is very important because not all the time do APIs give dynamic responses, right? So if it's a cricket match score, suppose you have an API which gives you the latest scores of a match that is happening. Okay, so what I was saying is that if you know for certain that your API backend, the response from your API backend is network issue. There's a network issue. Now it's fine. It's fine. Yeah. You are getting it right. Okay. Anyway, so okay, so once you know for certain that there is the information from the response from the API backend is constant for a period of time, what you can do is you can cache that response. So suppose the weather in an area or weather in Bangalore is say 32 degrees, and for certain that a 1 or 2 degree change in the next hour will not make a difference. So you want to keep it 32 for say the next 2 hours. So what you can do is you can cache that response, and anytime your API is called, it will give you the same response of say 32 degrees, right? If they query it for Bangalore, for 2 hour time, it will query it and it will say 32 degrees. And the reason you would want to do this is to prevent your backend and your API management instance from getting overloaded with requests for the sake of efficiency. Suppose there are a lot of requests that are coming in and it's giving the same response every time. You're better off just caching the response instead of making your backend overloaded with requests which are not changing, for which the response is not changing. Right. So what we can do is I'll just show you. So this is like the same demo conference API that we used in the last session. I'll just show you this. So this is, let's take this operation. It says get session. So if I give the session ID is given here. Let's say I give 101. So it gives me a response. So it gives me a 200 OK response in which I get, this is the session. So in this conference, the session with the session ID 101 is this. So C# was async in C# was the session. So similarly, it's just this is just a dummy test API which is made for this API management tests purposes. So as you can see, if you send this response 100 times also, you get the same response as expected because that's the session and it is given a particular ID. So what you can do is so that people don't keep making new requests and overload your backend. What you can do is you can go to the inbound processing and you can add a policy, and it's called a caching policy. So if you can see that there's a caching policy here. The first thing that it asks is the amount of time it has to be cached. So this is in seconds, right? So 3,600 seconds is 1 hour. So let us say I cache it for 60 seconds. Okay. So the next thing it asks is variable developer and developer groups. So this is, in case the request is from a different developer in a product or something, which I'll explain later about the products. So what this means is that if different people are querying this API, do we want to cache it differently for different time, or a different response? So we'll keep it for default for now. And there's another option where you can set a private response caching. So suppose certain APIs will need authentication, right? Some are, very user-specific API responses. Let us say I have a Gmail API which I query and see if I've got a new mail. The response that I expect by querying my Gmail account is different from what I would expect from your Gmail account, right? So in that case, depending on the authentication, you can change, if the private responses have to be cached. Sometimes what happens is if I keep opening my Gmail app and refreshing it, even if I didn't get a new email, it will show me the same screen. So in that case, what I can do is I can cache the private response, and then my Gmail app will show the same response for some time, say maybe 1 minute or 30 seconds, something like that. So otherwise, every time I cache, every time I say refresh, or every time I send a new request, it goes to the Gmail backend and it queries the server for a new email, even though it's not there. Very nice. So, and again, in the caching, you can enable revalidation, which is the authentication token. It just revalidates, just in case, just to check if it's made from the correct entity that should be making the response. So there's one other option called downstream caching. The thing is that today's modern browsers like Google Chrome and Opera and Firefox and Microsoft Edge have a caching mechanism inside. So you can instruct the browser itself to cache the response. So what you can do is you can say, downstream caching. You can instruct the browser itself to cache for a certain time, where the browser will not send the request itself. This is a little clunky. This is not recommended, but then that option is still there on the list. Okay, so in that you can say public, where any request from a agent is cached. So if it's from a browser where some program is making a API recall, then that will be cached in the agent itself. Okay, so there is no such entity that I have. So I just select none for now. And there is one other option where you can cache it internally or externally. So internal cache will be inside the API management instance itself. An external cache, if you say you have Redis, Redis is an application which is a caching application, or like something like Redis or Memcache also. You can cache it externally. So if you have that running somewhere in a cloud or an on-premise instance, you can see that you can cache that, and you can give the address of that, and you can add an external cache here. You can see in the left pane, you can see that there is an external cache. You can add Redis. Right. So if you click external and you configure your Redis cache here in the caching pane, you will, all the responses will be cached in that Redis instance, and it will not be cached in the API management. Okay. So you can, so again, caching has some limits. You can't cache all the responses. There is a limit for caching depending on your pricing tier. So the basic pricing tier, maybe it has, I don't know the numbers by heart. The numbers may range from 50 MB to all the way 500 MB for a premium tier. So internally, you can cache only so many responses, after which you might have to use, depending on cost efficiency and cost considerations, you may have to use a different external cache. So I'll keep it internal for now. And again, these are headers and query parameters. You can set that for such and such a query parameter, I have to cache the response. But I won't do it here. I'll do it in the policy screen. So for now, I'll just save this. Okay, and I think I did it for all operations. Let me see. Okay, yeah. So it appears that I have applied a caching policy for all operations. although I wanted to apply it for this particular operation. But anyway, so now what will happen is that because this caching policy here, as you can see, is applied for all operations, all the operation, any response from any of these operations will be cached. So let me see, let me just go to this get session. So what I'll do is I'll make an API call, and I'll show you how it works. Okay, so we go to test, and okay, so now I give the session ID, I give 101, as I said. I send the request and I get a response, as usual, right? Now I can go and look at the trace. The trace gives me the detailed information as to how the request was processed, where it went, how much time was spent, and all that. Just see the latency. It is about 1,275 milliseconds. So it's about 1.2 seconds, right? And it will also show you that how many seconds or milliseconds, how much time was spent on the inbound processing. So the total time spent was in the inbound processing itself. A major part of it, which is 788 milliseconds, was sent just in the inbound processing. And so it just shows you what was the header, what was the request, and everything. So I go down further, I scroll down, and then you can see that the backend where the API is hosted spent about 223 milliseconds in giving the response. Okay. Now you can see it'll show you if the cache was there. Okay. So see, I set a policy, right? So once there is a caching policy enabled, it goes and checks the caching policy. So what it says cache lookup. So it went and searched in the cache. And that was where in the inbound processing, it took 788 milliseconds, right? In that, 500 milliseconds went into searching for the response in the cache. Okay. And what happened after that? The cache resulted in a miss. What it means is that there was no response cached already. I mean, this response was not there in the cache. And why did this happen? This is precisely how cache works, right? The first time you make a request, that time there'll be nothing in the cache. The cache will be completely empty. And after that, you make the same request twice. Then it searches and then it finds that that response is in the cache, and then it gives it to you back. So presently, because this is the first time I made this request with the ID 101, right? With the session ID 101, this response was not there. So it was not there in the cache. It says cache lookup resulted in a miss. Okay, and it gives you the details. Cache control. There's no cache, and it also tells you that cache is internal. So now what to do? If I send the request again, because now this is the second time you see this, the response is only 208 milliseconds. So from 1.2 to 1.2 seconds, the response time of the entire process just reduced to 200 milliseconds. And why did this happen? Because it went into cache, it found the response, and it just gave it to you there, right? Oh no, this shouldn't be happening. Why is okay? Cache response miss. I'll just send it once again. Again, there's a okay. So there's 72 milliseconds, which is even faster. Just give me, let's see. It's in the trace. Okay, so as you can see, I don't know why that didn't come up in the second time. You can see that cache lookup resulted in a hit, which means that this response was cached, and then it came out right from the cache. So the request didn't go from the front end to the inbound processing to the back end. It just went to from the front end. It went to the inbound processing. The inbound processing just found that there's this response in the cache, and it just gave it to me. So this will happen for the next 1 minute. Okay, so this response will be cached in this API management instance for the next 1 minute, and after which the cache will be cleared. So if I make it again, the response will be slow after 1 minute, and then again it will cache for another next 1 minute, and then you get the cached response. So you might be wondering what will happen with say a different session ID. Again, some of you might expect that it is not there in the cache, and it will not be cached, which is correct. So what will happen is that because the cache is, the 103 session ID is not there in the cache, it will result in a miss. Okay. So if I do it again, if I run this again, maybe then it gives me a hit. Okay. So as you can see, the second time I, requested the same session ID, it says cache lookup resulted in a hit. So this way, you can cache your responses and save your server load and both to the backend and to the application management instance. So let us see. So this is the ID, right? But if you can see, if you're working with API management or APIs, your eyes will be trained to look at some of these problem areas. One area is that you get a response and you get a response header and there's the response body. You see that X, you see this, which is not supposed to be there. This is a huge security issue because you do not want to expose the stack, the technology that you've used to develop this API. This is the technology, right? We've used API ASP.NET 4.03, whatever version in the backend. And now the problem, that occurs is that maybe in the future somebody, discovers an exploit or a loophole or a bug in this version of, ASP.NET. This has happened with JavaScript also. There was something called a log4j vulnerability, which affected all the major social networking sites. This happened just a few months ago. So something like that, you don't want to expose this, stack. You don't want to know. You don't want people to know publicly what, how your internals are working in the back end and how requests are being processed and everything. So what you want to do is this is a generic response from any API management service, but you want to remove this. You want to probably delete this and cut it off. There's a policy for that also. So what you can do is that, like I'll explain the flow. Your request goes from the inbound and then it goes to the backend server. It gives you the response and then it comes to the outbound processing. So as you might have guessed, you have to delete or censor that part of the response in the outbound processing window, right? I mean, in the outbound processing module, because inbound processing is just, it just processes the requests, and what comes from the backend as a response is processed in the outbound processing module. So what I do, I'll just duplicate this window. I'll just send a request. Okay, let's say 102. Okay, so this is the response. We are bothered about this part. So what I'll do, I will put a policy in the outbound processing. So again, you can put a policy globally, or you can put a policy only for this operation. I'll just put it for this operation for now. Although, these outbound processing policies, it makes sense to put it in the global policy level if the responses are alike. So this is what we want to, delete or remove. I can say I want to add a policy. So there is something called mask response. I'll just see where it is. Okay, you can do set headers in there because that is in the header part of the response, right? This is in the header, and this is the body. This is the body of the response. So in the header, I find that these two lines are a problem. So what I do is in the set headers, I can set the header to look a particular way I want it to. So I can remove all of this. I can even, there's another problem area where conference API.azurewebsites.net. This is also a problem because this is a backend link, right? I don't want to expose this backend link. I just want it to be the link to this, which I'll show you in the overview pane. This should be the request link, right? CanSpark API APIM.azure API.net. Instead, it is in the response. It is giving me the backend server link also, which is not desirable. So what I'll do, I'll deal with these two lines. Because in the header I don't want this, I will copy this and I'll say name. Right? In the name I put this value. There's no value. What I want to do is to delete this. correct? Next, I'll add another part where I say this is X powered by. I'll add that. And again, I want this to be deleted. Okay, so I'll hit save. It says probably there is one value here that the value shouldn't be even null, because sometimes null values are also detected in the response, right? So this probably by default this is none. So I hit save. Okay, now that this is saved, I'll send this response one more time. Let's see. You see that it's not there itself, right? It's removed. That part is completely removed. But then if I go for a different operation, just to show you, I'll take something simpler maybe. Topics. I choose a different operation. I'll say day number 1. Because this policy was applied only for this particular operation, get session, it will not be applied. So you can see this here, right? So you can apply it globally, but then just to, for you to clearly differentiate, I just applied the operation, the policy here. So I'll say 102, and then you can see any request that X powered by is removed, right? I can say a similar way, I can even remove the URLs also. Regarding the policies, there is one other thing that I wanted to mention, that is the custom policies. So policies are eventually, although this is a GUI format that I'm using, policies are eventually converted into XML formats. So these are the policies, and it's a single file. Whether you apply a outbound policy or inbound policy, it all comes and lands up into this file. Okay, so there are again 4 files, which is one at the global level, the product level, and the API level, and the operations level. For this is the operation level file, where you can see that for this operation we have enabled a caching policy, and these are the parameters of that. And we have enabled that private response is false. All that is recorded here, and caching type is internal, right? This is in the inbound, and then there's you can set a backend policy also, and there's a cache response, which means that in the outbound processing window, the response will be cached for 60 seconds, which makes sense, right? Because the response has to be stored and sent from the outbound module. You put that caching part of that, the storage part of the caching policy in the outbound. So it says 60. So I can change it here, and it'll reflect in the caching. So this is an view of the XML file that that is used for caching policies. Not just this, you can use other types of policies also, which are there, which is available in the code snippets. So if you want to check a HTTP header, or if you want to restrict IPs, like I said the earlier session, you can even limit the call rates. So again, you can just set this, and it will add the code snippet here. So suppose if I want to, in the inbound processing, so in the inbound processing, if I want to say set a quota key, it says you can add this key. So I can this is the keyword for the XML tag. I can say quota key is equal to so many KB or something. So I won't be adding this right now, because we'll have to see the documentation also, because sometimes a mistake in the way these tags are written may not may make a policy dysfunctional. So we just want to be sure that it's written in the correct format. So I'll just remove this, and I'll show you that API document where, sorry, the documentation of the site, I mean the policy. You can just go to APIM policies in the Azure, Microsoft documentation. APIM policies. So you have a whole list of policies here. Okay. So there's a policy reference site. So you can see that there are all different types of policies. There's authentication policy, and there's transformation policy, one that which we applied, right? To mask a URL or something like that. So you can even mask a URL. So because we had a problem with this URL, as you could see, the backend URL was also coming in the response. You can use this policy. So you can go there, and this is the redirect URL content. So if you put this policy in the outbound processing, it will remove the URL. Okay, so these are some things that you can try. The one last thing about policies is the CORS, which is cross-reference domains. Okay, suppose your API management instance is accessing another domain from the API management instance, a domain which is outside the API management instance. You can set the CORS. Okay, so it's in the developer portal. Okay. Okay. Ananda wants to know what is the difference between external and internal caching. Everybody just, I would encourage you to use your mics, because while I'm talking, I wouldn't see the chat. The chat doesn't pop up. Okay, so like I said, the internal caching is cached. So the response, if you select an internal caching, the response of the cache will be stored within the API management instance. Okay. But if you select an external caching, if you select the option as external caching, right, you will be able to use a separate server or a database where you can, or particularly there's one application called Redis, where you can save all your caches. It is meant for caching. It is optimized for caching. It works in the memory, so your responses will be cached in Redis. So you can say, you can add this, you can give a Redis instance. You can give the you can create a Redis instance in Azure. You can give a link to that, and it will be cached outside the API management instance. So if you have an on-prem Redis cache also, Redis cache is again not free, so it has a price attached to it. So suppose you are using Redis. Redis is not just for API caching; it is used for database caching also. So if you have a Redis cache somewhere and you've paid for it, you can use that cache. You can use Redis, a separate utility, to cache your responses. I hope that answers your question. So what I was saying, I was referring to CORS, right, which is cross domain references, where you find that in the developer portal. So you can enable CORS here. So cross origin resource sharing. What happens is that your API management instance will be able to access, say, if it is a put request or some other domain to domain access. You can enable this, and it will ask you for all the details of the external server, where external domain where your API requests have to be pushed to or should be got from, and you can you can set it. It asks you for the details and all that. So just give me 1 minute. CORS should be here. It asks you for the SSL certificates, and yeah, here. So it asks you for the SSL certificates and the gateways and all that. So I wouldn't be going to this because I don't have SSL certificate. It asks you for the host name and certificate. You can select a key vault or a SSL certificate, which will enable this instance to access the outside domain. Okay, so I think we'll have to go back. Okay. So next is something that is important from a development test point of view. That is revisions. Okay, so suppose you have an API which you are testing, and you're not sure if it's working fine, but then you just don't want to push it to production before you test it in the environment. So there was one, I had mentioned one such instance in the earlier session, which was mock responses, right? Suppose for a fact that your API responses will look a particular way, you can set mock responses, so that every time somebody from the front end team or somebody in another team who wants to test your response or your API will get the same response every time he queries that API. But this that is just for one operation. But then if you want, say, your API is quite ready, but then you're still not sure if you want to push it to production, what you can do is you can create a revision of it. So what happens is that you have two versions of your API. So I just created one beforehand. I can create another one. I'll just delete this. What you can do is you can create an API and you can put it into the revision so that if people are constantly accessing your API and you are still not sure, but you want to test your API before pushing it to production, but you're scared that it might break some things on the consumer's end who's consuming your APIs. You can create a new revision. So I can give a revision description, just say can Spark. Okay. So what happens is that in this revision, if I create an API, I can test it, but then it won't be available for the outside users, right? This will be available only in the API management instance. So it gives you this option. There are two options for setting parameters of the revision. One is online. So suppose you have like 5 or 6 API versions or APIs that you're testing. So you don't want to get confused between one and the other, right? So you create a few revisions. Let's say you create another 2 revisions. Uh, okay. Now there's a testing team that's testing these revisions. You don't want them to get confused as to which revision to test, right? So you can, in that case, you can just select which is online and which is not. So for say we want both of these online, or we can just say we can make this offline so that their testing is limited to this revision. So we can make this offline. So when I click take offline, it will go offline. And current refers to what is being used by anybody who has the access to the API. So presently, this is the base version which is being used presently, and this is ready for being queried from Postman from anywhere, right? But then once this is ready, I can make this current. So if I make it current, so I can give a description as to if there's something changed or something, I can put a description here, and it'll be visible publicly. Or if I don't want it, I can just say safe, and it'll become current. Note that only one of the revisions can be current at a time. Okay, you can't have two current. You can have multiple online revisions, but then you can have only one API which is current. Okay, which is actually usable by whoever has to use it. So I'll just show you how to change the revision. Suppose you have this is the revision 1, and I click on this, I get a different revision. So there's revision 2, which is just created, right, to May 26th, 4:43. So I just choose that. Okay, so this is the revision. It is the same API, but then I can add another operation in this. I can say add a mock response. I can add something, and that way both revisions. I mean, this revision will be ready for testing, while the other revision will be in use operationally. Okay, I won't dwell into it too much. You can test this out later because I see that we have 14, 15 minutes. I'll open up. I'll keep 5 minutes for questions. The last topic that I'll end today is versions. There's a difference between versions and revisions. So in revisions, it is generally meant for testing, right? If you have a few APIs which you want to test before you deploy, you would use revisions. But then if you want to use versions, what you can do is say there's an API which so today you have IPL going on. You can have an API which was probably developed say a few years ago, where there were a limited number of teams, and then after say 4 or 5 years there were new number of teams. But then the old API is still querying those old number of teams. But still, there are some apps that are using that API, but you don't want to break it. Okay, because the moment you remove that old API, a lot of other consumers who is actually consuming some other function of that API will be losing access and will be losing functionality. So if you want to, create another API, but then you want to, move your users to a different version of that API, you can create something called versions. Okay. Uh, Okay. So what you can do is the same API, I can create another version. So I can give the version identifier, I can say v1, and so I can say v1, and then suppose people have to access this, the people who are consuming my API have to access this. How do they access? Do they, say access it in the path itself, which is the request URL, right? So say it is scansparkapi.azure/apim.net/v1. That will be the access to the new API in this demo conference, right? Or should they send the version information in the header or the query string? So this is something that you can choose here itself. I'll say in the path. So as you can see, the path will be, there'll be the v1 appended to my path. And so this is the full name, it's asking me for the full API version name. I create it as it is, as I create. Okay. So that is a name that will be displayed in the API pane here, right? So now you can see that there are two versions in my API. So my demo conference API has an original, version with all the outbound processing and all that. Like, we just applied this outbound processing at the global level. You can see that, in the outbound processing, there is a set header policy. So if we query this, okay, the technology stack and what it is powered by and all that is removed. This is, I think I've set it to the global level, which is why, let's see. So you can set different policies for different versions. So you get the idea. So when you click here, when you click on this version and you set the policies, it will be applied for that version and that API level. But then if you set it at a global level, then then that's a different story. So let's see here. We are not getting the tech stack. Okay. But then in the V1, let me see the policies. Caching is there and cache store is there. Okay. So when I click this, okay. So because we created a version after I applied all these policies, it created an exact copy of it. So what I can do is I can remove the outbound policy, processing policy, uh, where I'll just delete this. I'll just delete one. Okay. And I say save. Now what happens is that when they query the API for this particular version, you get that response. See, you can say that, suppose I have a development team or a testing team which I want to expose this version, of the backend. I can just set a different version of that API and I can let them query it. Now you can see that, the querying URL is also changed, right? Earlier it was just this much, conference/session/101. Now there's a v1 attached to it. So you can set these policies, you can set different policies to different versions, or you can set different operations. I can say in the first, in the next version, I can add another operation. I can say, probably there'll be a put method where, you can update something, some details and everything, where the new API will have it, but this API will not have it. This version of the API will not have it. So that's about API management, versions and everything. Before ending, I'll just show you there's something called a developer portal. Now because I am the admin of this API instance, I have access to all this operations, and I have access to the authority to add and delete APIs and this and all that. But then suppose I'm working with a team of say 100 people, I wouldn't want all 100 people to access it from here, right? So I would want a portal where somebody can come and request for access, see what APIs are there and all that. So for that, the API management instance gives a ready built portal. There are two versions of it. This is the new one. I'll just show you. So this is something called a developer portal. where anybody who wants access to the API can come and request access or see, they can even test the API there. They can see what products are there in the API. You can make those assignments and all that. So you can see this is the new latest, portal where you can change this, right? You can say CanSpark. You can change this. You can make it, you can change the image and all that. You can say welcome to Contour. So you can change that to CanSpark. So that will be the final look of your developer portal. So if I save this, this will be the developer portal where people can come in and sign up for the API. They can request access and all that. There's another older version. You can make any one of these live. So this is the Canarys API. You can see that this Canarys, I said in the, if you see the title of this page, it says Canarys. This Canarys is taken from the organization. When you're creating an API management instance, it asks you for the organization. That is where this title is taken from. So when you're setting the organization, you should set it correctly. So this developer portal will show you, this is the old developer version. It's more easier to work with. So it shows you what APIs are available. So I've already logged in as an administrator, right? So I can sign out and show you a different view. I'll just explain. So you can see that, in the APIs, what APIs are available. It shows that, there's this demo conference API and there's an original version and there's an, version 1. And there are other APIs that I've added. So this is the same, number of APIs that are available here. But because I am an administrator, it is showing me all this. And there's something called products. Okay, there are 3 products. I wanted to explain products, but then there's very little time. Probably, if you're interested to know more, you can always ping me anytime after the session. So I'd be happy to help you. There's products and there's a starter product, test product, and unlimited, where you can set different rate limits. You can set different policies. You can set different configurations, different operations for the APIs in a product. So I can make a product which I can add a number of APIs, and I can say that you can, if you have access to this product, you can make only 5 calls per minute, okay, and 100 calls a week. But then if you can say, you can put a payment page and say, if you pay me so and so, or if you subscribe to my premium tier, you will have unlimited access to my APIs. So that is something you can see. You go to unlimited, you see that it has just one API, right? You can add this later. I'll just show you. And then if you look at the test product, this is just a product I made. This has the demo conference API, which I added that time. Okay, so you can click for subscription, and then it gives you access to that policy. So you can just say confirm. It just shows you. It comes into the product page. I'll just show you very quickly. So this is the administrator page, because that is why it's giving me all the access. So once you subscribe, once anybody subscribes, these are the details he gets. So for the API, he gets a primary key, secondary key, because these keys are required to be passed when making the request, right? You remember if I showed you. So if you remember, when making this response, when making this request, right? The key is being passed. So the subscription key is being passed. There you can see that this is the subscription key which is being hidden. I can make it shown. This is the subscription key that is being passed. Otherwise, you don't get the response. So each subscription, when you request, a primary key and a secondary key will be given. So you can see that test product. These are separate keys that are generated for each subscription. So these are some things that you can configure. Once I log out, a lot of this information will be taken out. So you can see that test product is not there, because only these 2 products I have published and made it available publicly in the product page. So I'll show you this products here. You can see that these are 3 products: starter, test product, and unlimited, right? But then because only these 2 are published, there's something called, you can change the status to publish. You can change it to unpublish. You can publish or unpublish, right? So because this test product is not published, publicly, if somebody is not logged in, he won't be able to see this. So this is about the product management page where, and also there's one option where if somebody wants to subscribe to your API, you can ask for you can make it such that he gets an approval, so that you can approve it, only then he'll get the access. Say suppose this is a test product, and I go to the settings and it says requires approval. So if I say requires approval, when he clicks on subscribe, which I showed you earlier, it comes into an approval page where you can approve, and then only then he'll be getting the access. So there's a lot more in API management service. I would encourage you to explore and get a feel for yourself. I'm always available offline after the session is concluded. I'd be more than happy to answer your questions. I hope the content was clear. Okay. Let me know if you have any questions. Okay, Arinda has a question. Why do you need to create APIs and Azure tools rather than creating directly on Visual Studio? Okay, no. So you see, APIs are created and hosted on a server where it is accessible privately or publicly, right? So creating the API is always done at the code level, which is developed in Visual Studio. So Visual Studio is your IDE, which is the integrated development environment, right? That is where you write the code. APIM, you can't write code, okay? So the code of the API as to what response should come and what is the request type it has to handle, all that is taken care of by the code which is written in Visual Studio or Visual Studio Code or any other IDE that you want. And then that is hosted, that is published, and that is compiled, published, and hosted on a server. After which, to control the inflow and the authentication and all that, you use the API management service so that it becomes, you have a greater amount of control. Otherwise, if you want to write all these policies into the API itself, you have to code it. And then if you have to change it again, you'll have to go back to the code and change it, right? So instead of that, you host the API as it is on a backend server somewhere, and then you use the API management in Azure to control all the aspects of the API. Does that answer your question? So if you can see, there is no way to create an API in API management service. Okay, so you can just add the API and control your APIs or the responses from the API management instance. You can't create or you can't code. Okay. Yes, there is some amount of delay, like you saw. So the question is, if is there some delay or some overhead that is added when you query the API directly versus if you query the API through a front end, right? I agree. I mean, that is always there, but then that is a very small trade-off that you would have for a lot of features that you can control with ease. So I can show you. I just send a request. If you're seeing my screen, see, you get a response. Okay, it will show you how much time was spent at various levels. So now a lot of things are added to this. It says 269 milliseconds were spent, and just 0.6 milliseconds. Okay, that is 607 microseconds were spent in the inbound processing. Okay, and I'll tell you, if you directly queried this API, okay, the backend itself takes 268 milliseconds. This is the direct querying of the API. So the time, of course, there is a delay. There's some overhead in terms of time that is added to the API, but that is really not the concern, because you want a lot of security features. You want a lot of rate limiting that has to be added to the API. So just hosting the API, it's okay for testing environment. But if you make a public API, like say Google has a lot of APIs, Twitter has a lot of APIs where you can use a Twitter API to query the latest tweets. You can query a Twitter API. You can Twitter has an API where you can get the tweets by the username. So all this is there where millions of people can be querying those APIs, and every request for the API from a particular user may be delayed by say half a second. But that is something that that can be easily written off given the advantages of having an API control system in place, right? So you can, otherwise, if you just host the API directly and billions of requests come in, then your server is completely dysfunctional. So this is a choice, there's a conscious choice, and this is, and it's also not a difficult choice. This is not something you think over. Oh yeah, if I have an API management service, in front of the API, it will give me half a second or 1 second delay. This is that is something that nobody thinks about also, because these are the features that are, way too good to miss out on. Thank you all for joining us today. I enjoyed giving the session. I hope you did enjoy as much as I did. So this will end the API management part of CanSpark. I hope you did get that encouragement to use API management if you are using APIs on a regular basis. Do let me know. I'm always available to answer questions on API management. So thank you, and enjoy the rest of your day.